Okay, hold on. Where do you want to start? Bengals or Bears? Okay, one sec. This guy said 2 firsts and a player for John Ross. Get the fuck out of my DMs, bro. Get the He said 2 firsts and a player. I can't, bro. That ain't Tom Brady, bro. What should I call it? Highlighting player ratings. Highlighting player ratings and teams with it. Okay. Alright. Let's get it started. Alright. Yo, yo, yo. I can't. No, I can't. I don't think so. Okay. So we're starting with the Bears, and we're going down each team, and we're gonna see what, how many players each team has in the 80, like 90 and 80 overalls. The Bears have 2 90s, Khalil Mack and Eddie Jackson, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. '80s. Hold up, where'd he go? What the fuck? I'm talking to myself, bro. And then the Bengals, they have 2 90s and Mixon, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. Yeah, I can hear you. And then we're on the Bills now, Ant. So the Bills don't have any 90 players, but they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 80 players. The Broncos, they have 2 players in the 90s, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. The Browns have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players in the 80s. And then the Bucks, they have 2 players in the 90s and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in the 80s. The Cardinals have 1 player in the 90s and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players in the 80s. The Chargers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. The Chiefs have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players in the 90s, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players in the 80s. The Colts have 2 players in the 90s, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 players in the 80s for the Colts. The Cowboys have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players in the 80s. The Dolphins have no players in the 90s, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. The Eagles have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players in the 80s. The Falcons have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in the 90s, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players in the 80s. The 49ers have 1, 2, 3 in the 90s, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 players in the 80s. The Giants have no players in the 90s, but they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players in the 80s. Ant said the 5 worst team on the game were the Cardinals, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Bucks, and the Bengals. Alright, now here's the Bengals roster. So the Bengals have 2 players in the 90s, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. Okay? Now, we're going to go back to the Giants. Now, there's these teams that already have Trey's inputted. So, if, for example, Trey Burton was never on the Giants, he was on the Bears. So you got to keep in mind that he might have not been. Well, it was Evan Ingram, but then he got traded, right? So you got to keep in mind that that's the case as well, the trades and stuff. So the Giants have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players in the 80s. And then the Jags have 1, 2 players in the 90s. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players in the 80s. But they got the best team on the game? I don't think so. I really don't think so. The Jets have 2 players in the 90s. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players in the 80s. The Lions have 1 player in the 90s, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players in the 80s. The Packers have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players in the 80s. And the Panthers have 1, 2, 3, 4 players in the 90s, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 players in 15 players in the 80s. So right now, just we're almost halfway through. So just gonna let you guys know that the Jaguars have the worst team on the game right now with overalls and everything like that. With the Lions and the Bills are still better. They still have more 80 players than the Jags. Yeah, so right now, with every trade going into account, the Jags are in the same stage as the Giants, the Bills, and the Lions. The Patriots. They have one player in the 90s, Stephon Gilmore, X Factor, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 players in the 80s. That is absolutely ridiculous. That is crazy. Take into mind that there was a trade earlier today where Brady got sent to the 49ers, so that would have been 2 players in the 90s as well. But that is absolutely absurd. Yeah, so having 90s and 80s on the game makes a huge difference this year because the matchups are crazy and they do matter when you have certain players on the field. So it does matter. So we'll move on to the Raiders now. So the Raiders have 2 players in the 90s. One of them is an X Factor. Rodney Hudson, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players in the 80s. So the Raiders, Jags, Bills, Lions, and I believe you said the Giants. Yeah, so the Giants, yes. So those teams right now have the least amount of players that are in the 80s. So, Rams is next. So the Rams have 1, 2, 3 players in the 90s. 2 players are X Factor. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 players that are in the 80s right now. So that right now is like the second highest. I believe the Patriots had, I want to say that they had 17 or 18 players that Chiefs, Browns, Cowboys, Panthers, and the Patriots have and the Bears have the top 90s and the 80s right now, starting year 1 with trades coming into account. Now we'll move on to the Ravens. The Ravens have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 90s. 2 of them are X Factors. Richard Sherman just came over in a trade. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 players that are in the 80s. So they're one of the top teams as well for having the most 90s in the 80s. The Redskins, they have one Trent Williams superstar, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 that are in the 80s right now. So that is one of the tops as well for the 80s, but they don't really have any. They don't really have high 80s. It's just low 80s, right? So that's probably in the lowest category, like bottom 10, really. Now the Saints. The Saints have a ridiculous amount of 90s that are X Factors. They have Thomas, Cameron Jordan, Drew Brees, and Kamara right now. They're all their 90s are X Factors right now. That is absolutely ridiculous. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players that are in the 80s right now. So that's with the top right now. So we're moving on to the Seahawks. The Seahawks have two 90s. Both of them are X Factors. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players that are in the 80s. Yeah, so they're in the bottom, really. Yeah. Bottom. Yeah, he's 7-0 right now. Yeah. Steelers have one David DeCastro superstar. Then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players that are in the 80s. The only one that's in the high 80s right now that I see is Juju Smith-Schuster. So I'd probably put them in the bottom category right now, just because they don't really have that many high 80s. They only really have one, and it's not really helping them that much. So I'll put them in the bottom. The Texans have DeAndre Hopkins, and they as a superstar X Factor, 99 overall, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players in the 80s. Yeah, the Texans blew up his whole team. He got rid of J.J. Watt. He got rid of Clowney, which are both like superstar X Factors on his team. So basically, he would have had three if he didn't make those trades. He would have had three 90 plus or 4 90 plus players that were X Factors on his team. Plus, he has all of these 80 guys on here. He doesn't really have. Yeah, they're low 80s, so he's really a bottom right now. Bottom team right now. Yeah, he has one loss. He has one loss right now. The Titans have two that are in the 90s. None of them are X Factors. Delaney Walker, Kevin Baird. And then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 players that are in the 80s. To be honest, I'll probably put these guys in the bottom just because they only have 2 players that are in the 86. And then the rest of them are really like low 80s. So he doesn't really have anything to work with right now. I don't know what his record is off by heart. I think, yeah, he's 4-2, so he's not doing bad, right? So he's 4-2. He only has 2 losses on the season. And then the last team is the Vikings. He has 1, 2, 3 people that are in the 90s. 2 of them are X Factors, Thielen and Smith. You could probably work Stephon Diggs up to an X Factor if you ball with him. And then he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players that are in the 80s right now. He has about 3 players that are actually high 80s. I'll probably put him like maybe in the maybe in the middle right now, because he could probably get a couple more players that he can build up to 80s or something like that in the drafts to come, or he can trade for a couple players. But honestly, basically, yeah, if we're taking a look at it, if you're looking at it on the top teams for overalls right now, basically it would be the Browns. The Browns are first. They have, yeah. Chiefs have the most 90s on their team right now with 7 players. I'll show you guys. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right now. Then it's the Browns. We'll go over to them. I'll show you guys a visual. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players right now that are in the 90s right now, right? Then they have the Chargers. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as well. And then I believe we said the Patriots. Was it the Patriots or was it the Cowboys? Yeah, Cowboys. Cowboys have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that are in the 90s right now. So those are the top teams with the 90s overall. Eagles have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that are in the 90s. Falcons have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they have the second most right now. I believe the Saints have 4, I thought. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4. Chiefs, Ravens, Browns, Cowboys, and Eagles have the most 90s right now on the team. So again, the Chiefs, Browns, Ravens, Cowboys, Eagles, and the Falcons have the most 90s on the team right now. And Boone's probably not going to make playoffs because he got absolutely destroyed, but that is for a different podcast with Ant tomorrow. This is the end of the podcast tonight. Peace out, guys. See you next time. This guy said, bro, say who this player in the 80s are some of the best in the league. Stop on the Jags. This guy Skeeve 1 Foru. I think it's the Bengals guy. It must be. Ski 1 4 SK1 FORU. You said, oh, it's J. I think it's J. It might be J Farmer. I don't know. No, it's not. What's his name? What's his name? I want to see his name. Just because I want to see his name. View comments. SK1 FORU. Yeah, it's through my eyes. It's the same. It's the Bengals guy. What a guy.